Greetings, non-feminist men and women everywhere on earth. Today is Monday, December 14th, 2015. Welcome to episode number 75 of the Vanguard Report. Feminism must either coexist with the rest of the world or not exist. That puts the conversation where it needs to be. Any other conversation is simply inefficient, like a crooked road that goes all over the map instead of a straight road that goes straight to your destination. Feminism, don't get us wrong, feminism is welcome to exist in this world, but it must learn to play nice and get along with everybody else. Feminism is not the only game in town. There is a world beyond feminism. A world, I say, not empty space for feminism to push itself into, but a complex living system which is capable of pushing back. The non-feminist sector is something. It's not nothing. It's not a vacuum. Empty space, you see, does not push back. So if you're getting pushback, that's a pretty good sign that you've got something real on your hands. And if it's real, your best plan is to treat it like something real. Pushing harder can only make your life more complicated. Feminists, if you want to live in a feminist world, my advice to you is to lock yourself in a closet with other feminists and never come out again. That's the nearest thing to a feminist world that you will ever find. Lock yourself in a closet with a bunch of other feminists. Of course, if living in the feminist closet gets old, you're always welcome to come out again and walk around. But just remember, if you want to enjoy the advantages of walking around freely in this world, you will just have to put up with the disadvantages, won't you? So that puts the conversation where it needs to be, doesn't it? Just remember, we're here and we're not feminist. So get used to it. All right, now that Nick Redding, true son of the Alberta Prairie, can no longer be with us at the scheduled time, I have been playing musical co-hosts. Last week, it was Kevin Wayne from Portland, Oregon. This week we got some problems. We have a co-host scheduled. That co-host is Elizabeth Hobson from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That'll be England. Okay. Elizabeth was going to be my co-host here. She's having a really tough time connecting with the Google Hangout. And I'm communicating with her on Facebook right now, and she's talking about all of her woes and travails in trying to get connected. She tried to get in here. She got booted out of the Hangout. She's having one problem after another. It's looking rather nip and tuck here, whether I'm going to have a co-host or not. If Elizabeth manages to get in, then she gets in. If not, I'm going to have to wing it solo, but not like I've never done that before. Anyway, let's see what Elizabeth has to say here. She says she's restarting her computer. Okay, well, sometimes a reboot can be helpful. We'll see. She is messaging me from her mobile device. I'm going to write her a message right now. Keep us posted. There you go, Elizabeth. best of luck to you. I hope she is able to log into the Hangout. But in the meantime, the show must go on. So, no Elizabeth, but here we go. First, I want to recommend Cora Newbold's Cafe Press online store. I know I've been plugging this for the last 2 or 3 episodes. Here you can find all manner of things non-feminist. T-shirts, coffee mugs, beverage cups, tote bags, computer covers, mouse pads, wine glasses, water bottles, tea kettles, blankets, pillowcases, golf balls. That's right, golf balls. Are there any feminist golfers out there? Do feminists like to play golf, I wonder? I don't know. Interesting question. Anyway, all you feminist golfers out there, you might want to get your very own non-feminist golf ball that's got the non-feminist universal logo printed on the surface. A golf ball with a non-feminist logo printed on it. So you can see the possibilities there. You can just knock that sucker around. You can whack it and whack it again. Because I know that's what you want to do to all things that are not feminist. Okay, so this will be therapeutic for you. And there's also stickers and small posters and the like, which you can get and stick up on your dartboard in the classic manner, so you can throw darts at the non-feminist sector. I'm sure that too would be therapeutic because you can't be on the golf course all the time, right? So, something for everybody. If you're a non-feminist and you want to show your solidarity with the non-feminist part of humanity, then you can do it that way. You can get yourself a nice t-shirt with the non-feminist logo printed on it there. It's in black with the black and white logo on top of it. You can get a coffee mug. You can get all of this neat stuff to show where you stand and get weird looks from people. And let the feminist part of the world know that the non-feminist part of the world is real, it is here, and that they better get used to it. So that is cue number 1 on your cue list. This is cafepress.com. Cora Newbold has that online store. Cora runs Men's Rights Quincy in Quincy, Illinois. And I want to help out. Your proceeds from anything you purchase there will go to help Men's Rights Quincy, in addition to getting the message out. Hello. I got booted out of the Google Hangout, and now I'm back. We are plagued with technical difficulties here. It sure was a lot easier when we had, 24/7 radio. Google Hangouts is nothing but trouble, nothing but headaches. Sometimes, pretty severe headaches. All right, where was I? I just got through plugging Cora Newbold's Cafe Press online store with all of the non-feminist merchandise you can get there. So, how is Elizabeth doing? So far, I have no word from Elizabeth. I do hope she's able to get in here, but if not, the show goes on. All right, last week, Kevin Wayne and I spent 2 hours fishing in troubled waters. Well, talking about the MGTOW phenomenon, the men going their own way phenomenon, the big abstract force of history which has come about due to the advent of radical feminism into our world. So yes, my general conclusion was that MGTOW is a force of history affecting lots of men and indirectly women too, because after all, what happens to men affects women. We're all in the same social ecology, okay? And that nobody owns this MGTOW thing. It's a thing unto itself. It's bigger than all of us, but we participate in it in our own varied ways. But basically, MGTOW is an open source cultural idea that clusters around a certain core reality of history. Again, as I said, the state of the world which has arisen since the advent of radical feminism. And this has fostered a drastic change in the cultural reality for men, a change for the worst. And hold on a second, I'm getting a message from Elizabeth. She says she's taking up golf. Okay. Elizabeth, you're not logging in to the Google Hangout. I can see that you're listening to the program. So if you want to keep up a line of spicy commentary there on Facebook while I'm talking, that might be kind of fun. Anyway, the show goes on. This has fostered a dramatic change in the cultural reality for men, a change for the worse. Men are responding in a variety of ways, whether knowingly or naively, but the growing trend is a psychological exodus toward the exit door. Bottom line, the social contract is broken. And a lot of men are waking up to this and looking out for number one and voting with their feet. Another way of putting this is that men feel implicitly or otherwise that they no longer quite have the same burden to uphold civilization in various ways that they might have had. Oh, what's this? Looks like Elizabeth has joined the video call. Elizabeth, talk to us.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very loudly and clearly.
There you go. I had to restart.
But you're here now.
I was listening to you on my phone, asking me to keep you posted, and I could not keep listening and keep you posted, so that was why you didn't hear from me for a while.
Oh well. So let's rewind the tape on the episode here a little bit. We need to give you a proper introduction. So, backing up here, this is Elizabeth Hobson from the sceptered Isle of Albion.
Greetings.
Yes. Greetings from the great upper left of the United States of America, Elizabeth. Good to have you on the Vanguard Report. Elizabeth, let's do our little ritual formality here that we usually do when we get some new person on the program. Forgot to do it with Kevin last week, but anyway, I am Theodore Bogan, and I am a non-feminist. Elizabeth, are you a feminist or a non-feminist?
I am Elizabeth Hobson. I am a non-feminist, a proud non-feminist, and oftentimes a positively anti-feminist.
Well, you know, we could get into the nuances of feminist versus anti-feminist, I suppose. Yeah, if you're non-feminist, then you're in the same boat with anybody who is against feminism, because, as you know, feminism doesn't want anything else to exist on Earth than feminism. And if you're a non-feminist, you're just an anti-feminist waiting to happen. You'll get there eventually. If you're an anti-feminist, well, you're just a non-feminist in a hurry. You know, either way it works out. So welcome to the show, Elizabeth. Anything more you want to say about yourself? I mean, rather than me introducing you, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I am working at the moment on a site called Trigger Warning with some friends, and are um, we promote intellectual diversity.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're working towards.
Oh, very well. Be nice if I had your website linked there on the queue list, but I don't. Hindsight is better than foresight. Is that an easy
Uh,
one to read out over the air?
yeah, it is www.triggerwarning.us.
That's pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
www.triggerwarning.us. I see you've entered it in the group chat there. You're right on
Uh-huh.
top of it. So yes, everybody go there, check out Trigger Warning. And that is, I like the phrase intellectual diversity because that dovetails very much with much of the theme of tonight's episode.
Uh-huh.
We'll get into that. We'll be talking about, the university community and introducing counter-feminist narratives there. And it's all about intellectual diversity because, of course, intellectual diversity is the last thing they want in that setting. For all their talk about diversity, well, that's just empty talk. It's just mere wind.
It's diversity of everything other than intellectual diversity. It's welcome at universities, it seems.
Well, yeah, they have a have a funny notion of diversity. It's not a very diverse kind of diversity. I don't think they realize just how much is entailed or encompassed by the word diversity. Anyway, so Elizabeth, good to have you on the show at last. All's well that ends well. Let's see if I can pick up where I left off. Now, where did I leave off? Oh, yes, we got through talking about the cafe press there, and you mentioned something about you were going to take up golf. That was good. And so okay, I'm just going to start here, even at the risk of repeating myself. This has fostered a drastic change in the cultural reality for men. A change for the worst. Men are responding in a variety of ways, whether knowingly or naively, but the growing trend is a psychological exodus toward the exit door. Bottom line, the social contract is broken. And a lot of men are waking up to this and looking out for number one and voting with their feet. Not only is it not true that quote unquote women are oppressed, but the case can be made that men as a political class indeed are oppressed. And by that I mean that active forces, willful, deliberate forces, are working to the detriment of the male sex class all across society on many fronts. Yes, feminism typically involves Orwellian versions of the truth, and the question of who is or isn't oppressed furnishes a prime example. There are plenty of institutional mechanisms working on behalf of women. There is a vast political lobbying machinery working on behalf of women. There is the United Nations in all of its various branches that is madly working to promote women's interests all around planet Earth, and yet somehow women are oppressed. We could go on and on with this, but there is no doubt that there is a very persistent anti-male bias throughout the culture and in law and already entrenched into many institutions. I think there is a better case to be made that men are an oppressed class than women are at this point in history. Not to say that women ever were oppressed. That's a more complex question that we won't really go into now. But anyway, Here it's about perception. We have more and more men are realizing that men are getting a raw deal, and I think they're right about that. And they're realizing, hey man, fuck this, I'm out of here. And they're checking out, well, at least psychologically, and in some cases more than that. But they're just kind of thinking about things, and they're kind of figuring that, hey, I don't have any stake in civilization anymore. The way I'm being treated, the way me as a member of the class male is being treated, it just doesn't pay to give a damn about upholding civilization and becoming a upstanding member of society. So this disenchantment, this walking away, is the source of the going your own way thing, as I interpret it. There are others who interpret it differently, and we'll maybe touch upon that here in a minute. Now, last week we talked about this. We devoted the better part of the episode, me and Kevin Wayne did, to talking about this theme. And predictably, well, we got a little bit of pushback. We got a lot of downvotes on the episode, the one that was loaded onto Paul Elam's channel, and then also Kevin Wayne took a copy of that and then loaded it onto his channel. We got a lot of downvotes. We got a lot of upvotes as well. But I want to share a reader comment that somebody left. A person who goes by the name of anti-gynocentrist. And I liked what this person had to say because it very largely accords with my own thinking. Here we go. Anti-gynocentrist says, I have steered away myself from thinking of MGTOW as some personal label. I think it is better used as a descriptive term to describe the behavior of large groups of men opting out of gynocentric social norms, practices, and institutions to varying degrees. It is, however, driven and caused by individuality, and it is not a movement. I don't think the label has much use beyond being a descriptive rather than a prescriptive term. People can say, I am not a MGTOW, but that is not going to change the fact I am not going to get married. Okay? The label and belonging to a group is not the thing that gives MGTOW power. It is men independently going off in different directions regardless of what you label them. This is what the media, who have recently gone on the attack against MGTOW, the BBC, for example, don't realize about the nature of MGTOW. You can demonize men identifying with the label, but that is not going to change anything about men's behavior because MGTOW emerges from personal life choices. MGTOW is not a movement dependent on group unity and solidarity. MGTOW emerges from individual men on their own, waking up to how they are exploited and making their own choice to opt out independently of external input from other people. Every man that is MGTOW on his own terms, in his own way, and from his own experience and decisions. The media think they are attacking a movement, when in actual fact, MGTOW is a cultural trend driven by individuals that have arrived at MGTOW from reflecting on their own experiences and making their own independent assessment of the world and making their own personal decisions. The media can attack the label and men will simply drop the MGTOW label and still go their own way. Nothing of substance will change. It will do nothing to change the underlying mindset men have or their behavior. In actual fact, attacking MGTOW will reinforce those factors in men and drive further growth in the MGTOW phenomenon. I apologize if this was repetitive, but this is a message that really needs to be reinforced to people new to MGTOW right now in light of the recent media witch hunt against MGTOW, particularly people that are still taking the mainstream media seriously. And that is the end of the statement by anti-gynocentrist, left in response to the last episode of the Vanguard Report where we talked about these things. And a few general comments there. I like what this person is saying. It very largely accords with my own thinking. And my own vision of MGTOW, which this person seems to share, is that MGTOW is a political thing. However, a lot of people who have taken up the label of MGTOW as a personal label, as an identifier, you know, they say, I am a MGTOW, which to me is an absurdity, but that's how they say it. Their whole entry, their point of entry into MGTOW is the realm of women and relationships. This is a gynocentric MGTOW. It's a bunch of people who make the personal, women and relationships, the main plot, the main focus, the point of origin for the whole MGTOW phenomenon. And that's certainly not the way I would see MGTOW. I think I've made my own position on MGTOW clear enough. It is a political thing that begins upon the broad stage of history, the broad stage of the world. It begins as a product of the world historical process. It is a political and ideological thing. And yet some people want to make it a little club of guys sitting around complaining about women. And I find that pathetic. I mean, I think that MGTOW has more grandeur and dignity than that. That's just what I think. So I would like to introduce the concept of political MGTOW in order to encompass MGTOW as I am describing it here, the vision of MGTOW that I wish to communicate. What some of these other people are doing, to give it a name, I will call it relationship MGTOW. See, we got two different kinds of MGTOW here. We have relationship MGTOW, and we have political MGTOW. And then, of course, there is the original MGTOW vision, the manifesto that was written in 2004. Elizabeth, I know you were reading that manifesto just before you came on the program here. We were talking. And do you have any impressions of that 2004 MGTOW manifesto?
Let me think. Yes, let's see. The goal is to instill masculinity in men, femininity in women, and work toward limited government. Limited government, definitely. You know, and I am very keen on masculinity and femininity. You know, the goal is to instill that kind of, I'm not too sure about that. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. You know, I think maybe what what was that guy called?
Oh, anti-gynocentrist.
Anti-gynocentrist was talking about this sort of cultural trend. What I was thinking, you know, about what he was saying is that I think that it's of the utmost importance right now that everybody takes personal responsibility for our moral values. And so, you know, not what's instinctive to us, because, you know, what's instinctive to us is gynocentric, not what's bestowed upon us from society, because that's very gynocentric as well. And so, you know, yeah, I like the cultural trend that is political MGTOW, and I'd probably add that we should also be pursuing WGTOW in that. kind of model as well. Women going their own
Women
way.
going their own way. What do you see women going their own way from in this MGTOW vision of yours?
Free thinking, basically, pursuing objectivity, rationality. Definitely, it goes on to say, by instilling masculinity in men, we make men self-reliant, proud, and independent. That's something that we want for men and women, surely. And if women were self-reliant, proud, and independent, then there would, be much. They would not want to rely on men for what they do. We would not have these issues of women wanting men to pay for their bad decisions, by which I'm thinking about, children,
Yes.
Welfare state.
This is theoretically what feminism was supposed to be once upon a time, as I recall. It is anything but that, as we know.
So we come down in this manifesto. It says that women having other qualities is not interesting to men because we don't need them. Femininity will be the price women pay for enjoying masculinity in men. I don't agree with that. No, I mean, that's kind of how my relationship works. I have a masculine partner and I'm quite feminine. But this is not something that I want society to be pursuing. I want people to be free to have their own relationships.
Pretty much do what they want, yes.
And there are masculine traits and feminine traits and masculine brains and feminine brains, but they don't necessarily, they're not binary. I hate to sound like a feminist, but they're not.
Well, if I may interject here for a moment, I think it's not binary, it's roughly binary, but there are plenty of exceptions.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there is a difference in the male and female brain. I mean, that much has been shown. But at the same time, there is a lot of variation when it comes down to individuals. You have mannish women and womanish men out there. So when we say that there is a shall we say male archetype, female archetype, and traits common to each, that's just a broad statistical trend. Now, this is me talking here. This is how I see it. And I think feminism has exploited that because that does create a certain ambiguity. There are, women who are exceptions. There are men who are exceptions. And yet the overall trend is that women are women and men are men. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I mean, if we might just branch off slightly, because I've got an interesting couple of sort of anecdotes in relation to that, which is that I discovered watching TV not so long ago that male primary school teachers tend to have far more feminine brains. I watched an experiment that was done with a male primary school teacher and a woman quantity surveyor, and he scored far more highly on tasks that women normally score highly on, and she scored much more highly on tasks that men would usually score higher on. So yeah, like I say, I love masculinity and femininity, but I don't want anybody to be, to have to fulfill those kind of roles. I think it's important to have the freedom.
I would say the individual comes first. People should be what they are, and if that something is a little bit skewed from the norm, well, then they should be free to be skewed.
Mhm. I like it when we get down to the part where he says that they want to help boys to grow up to become men. I think that's an incredibly important goal. That should definitely be something that MGTOW is pursuing, you know, and it
Well,
really.
depending on what form or what branch of MGTOW you're into, I guess.
Sorry?
Oh, I was saying that MGTOW being at least somewhat of an open source concept that I see MGTOW going its own way from itself in a dozen different ways. So I guess
Which
what
is
you're just
good and
what you're
right, really.
I'm sorry, say again.
That's what should happen, shouldn't it?
I
Is look at it
suppose,
in our own
yes.
way.
Within the requirements of coherence, within the requirements of MGTOW even being a thing at all, and having any kind of a concept for it. But yeah, go ahead with what you're saying about what you think MGTOW should pursue.
Well, I think that the lack of strong male role models is a massive problem in society, and that's something that you can see when you look at the family situations and the outcomes, for Black Americans, and the kind of trends, that are starting to happen in other communities as well. I mean, there's really an explosion of single motherhood and fatherlessness
Yes,
going on at the moment.
it's been going on for some time now. It's been a growing trend,
Mm.
and feminism has something to do with this. I'm sure. In fact, I know it does.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguable whether feminism on its own can destroy a relationship, but if you have a relationship that has any issues, feminism, can really be that last kind of nail in the coffin.
Well, it's
And
like if there's a crack there, feminism is able to get a wedge in and start pounding.
absolutely, and from a sort of female perspective, if you are in a position where you have conflict in a relationship, and so you're not mentalizing at full capacity, you're stressed and confused, and then when you speak to your friends or you look online, everybody is saying, well, he's a man and he's oppressing you, and that's just what they do. It makes it very difficult to deal objectively with that situation. And if you start looking at the Duluth model,
Oh,
it's
that
it's going to
evil
start
Duluth
getting
model.
absurd. And a lot of social services and groups have their own Duluth model that they've added to. And so you get these, hundreds and hundreds of different criteria, which are, most of it is fairly normal human behaviour. And when you add in the fact that, relationships have problems, and, maybe add in mental illness or addiction and things like this, and when you add in problems that women who are daughters of single mothers have, and the rise of borderline personality disorder, and you start thinking about, there's abuse, what they call abuse, like, does he control your spending of money? Does he criticize you? And obviously, if you have problems with impulsivity, and if you have problems with expressing yourself and communicating, and all these different problems that you were going to have if you have borderline personality disorder, for example, then his behavior will meet the criteria for the Duluth model,
Well,
but
the
not
Duluth
be.
model, everything about it looks at the world through the lens of feminist ideology, and that's what makes it such a disaster.
It's laughable.
No, it's
Because
laughable,
the
except it's
model
not
is
funny.
only applicable to men's behaviour, and
Well, I mean,
there's no part of the Duluth model and the different places you will read it and the social services that use it where they factor in a woman's behaviour.
or the fact that women can get out of line sometimes.
Well, a woman could fulfil every single criteria as well. But
Yes, but according to the Duluth model, which is a totally feminist construct from stem to stern, it's the patriarchy. It's always the patriarchy.
Mhm.
It's always what he is doing to her.
Absolutely, and from experience, I would say that the kind of seeping down and the infiltration of feminism to normal women who don't necessarily even identify as feminist through kind of media.
It's been infused
Um,
into the cultural ambient.
it has, it
Basically.
has. And I mean, I try not to talk about my relationship with women because anything that a woman does um, is excusable, and it's, well, he knew who you were when he got together with you, and you have these other great qualities, so he should take this shit from you. But any that could go for quite extreme behavior. But any tiny little thing that a man does is absolutely not excusable, and you deserve better,
Well,
etc., etc.
that's feminism in a nutshell. Men are the problem. And that principle applies clear across the board. I mean, in the Duluth model, in everything that feminism touches, you get this idea that men are the problem, and women are not.
Which is fine,
It's
because
insidious. It's insidious.
nutcases are fine. It's okay to have them in society, but it's the fact that so many people have these unconscious beliefs.
Well, they do. And that's a complex can of worms right there.
That's why we all need to be engaged in pushback.
We all need to be engaged in pushback. Well, that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, let's move the program along. So much for the little bit about MGTOW I was going to talk. I wanted to share that comment from anti-MGTOW. I thought it was great, and it was very gratifying to me to see that comment pop up, the minute that we put out that episode. Anyway, a couple of items on the Q list. Q number 2, Q number 3. These are both articles written by me. They're both on my blog, CounterFem2. And neither one of these articles is directly about MGTOW per se, but the themes taken up in the articles are very much apropos, very much relevant to the subject area of MGTOW. And if you're at all interested in that, I offer them for what they're worth here. It's Q number 2 and Q number 3. So go check those out if you're so inclined. Now, let's turn to another subject that we were going to talk about last week, but didn't get around to it because we got carried away in the flow of conversation about other things. This is the vetoing the dictionary. Vetoing the dictionary. The dictionary is not God, We're going to share a few thoughts about our non-feminist veto power over the dictionary definition of the word feminism. The dictionary definition of the word feminism. Elizabeth, I'm sure you've heard this plenty, where they come up and say, well, you don't know what feminism means, just look in the dictionary. We've all heard that. That little trick is the spindle of the swindle. It's very important. This is cutting edge stuff right now, because it all comes down to this whole question of what is feminism. If we're going to go up against feminism, if we're going to oppose feminism in any way, we need to arrive at some understanding of just exactly what is this thing that we call feminism. And this is where the feminists jump in. Controlling the definition, the meaning of the term feminism is absolutely central to this whole conflict that we're in. It is really, really, really central. A lot of things hang upon this. So it's worth looking into and exploring. So we're going to share a few thoughts about our non-feminist veto power over the dictionary definition of the word feminism. Feminism is what we say it is, okay? This is part of reclaiming our non-feminist life space by reclaiming the language that was stolen from us. We're talking revolution here, and by revolution I mean something which abrogates or overthrows established authority. That's it. It abrogates or overthrows established authority. Authority gets established, and authority becomes so intolerable and so oppressive that eventually it's got to go. And it takes some kind of action, some kind of violation of the sanctity of that authority to bring the authority down, to knock Humpty Dumpty off the wall, if you will. And that's revolution. Revolution is what happens when, something's got to give. We've got to break the system, because the system is just not fixable. And revolution can happen in many ways, large and small. We're talking revolution here, and that means something which abrogates or overthrows established authority, or any system of authority. It's the thought that counts, folks. It's the thought that counts. So here on the Vanguard Report, we have a saying: feminism is what we say it is. I love to drill that statement in, and I sign off the episode every week with that statement. Feminism is what we say it is, not what they say it is. Well, I mean, they can say what feminism is. They can talk about it all they want. They can go in their little feminist closet and tell each other what feminism really is. But those of us who live outside of the feminist closet, to walk around in the real world, we have a different take on things. We have a different angle, a different perspective. We can see what feminism is very plainly with our own eyes, and we are taking hold of the authority, assuming the authority to make our vision, our understanding decisive. Okay? We're making our understanding decisive. We have some right to have some input into all of this and not be shut out of the conversation because somebody else controls the language. We put up with that for too many years. So, feminism is what we say it is. And when we say that, boy, do we ever mean it. Feminism is what we say it is. And why shouldn't it be? Elizabeth, do you see any objection to taking control of the meaning of the word feminism, despite anything a feminist might have to say about it?
No, I mean, I love language passionately, and I love the way language changes over time and meanings change. You know, so I have a quote at some point. I said that the slur misogynist has become a compliment,
I
which
believe
went
it's
down
you.
quite well.
I saw
And
that somewhere. I think you tweeted that on Twitter.
mhm, mhm. As far as the word feminism goes, as often as I have heard, you know, look at the dictionary definition, blah blah blah, I've also heard that there are an infinite number of feminisms. Okay, so every feminist has the right to define feminism for herself. Well, in that case, we have the right to define it as well as an infinite number. Okay,
There you go.
so here we are. We're all very willing to tell feminists what we think feminism is, and it's up to them to defend their own ideas, and they generally can't.
No, they
The
can't.
facade cracks pretty early with most of them.
Yeah, it does. Um,
Their actual values and beliefs are very rarely anything to do with equality.
very rarely, and that's even assuming that we can define what equality is in the first place, because of course the meaning of the term, the semantics of that word, just keeps shifting and sluicing around this way and that, very evasively. Now we could have a conversation some other time about the semantics of equality, and I'm not going to have that conversation here. Basically, we need to tell them to shut the hell up when they talk about the dictionary. Tell us we don't know what feminism is, so we should look in the dictionary. I mean, like we've never heard that before. Feminists, if you're listening, we get it. We understand. Look in the dictionary. We've heard that before. And yes, we have looked in the dictionary, and we find it lacking. We find it wanting. The dictionary just doesn't help us very much to navigate reality, and reality is what we need to navigate. The dictionary, the dictionary is not God. Now, there was a time way back in the long history of the human race when no such things as dictionaries even existed. And I can assure you that back in those mysterious ages, long ago, people were somehow able to talk to each other and use words and understand those words. And they didn't even have Webster's or the OED to run to. How in the good God gracious did they ever manage to get along without the dictionary to tell them what they really meant when they talked? So nowadays, the defining political struggle is something that we call the battle for feminism's soul. Now, chiefly, this means the battle to say what feminism is, full stop, and to make that definition stick. Such is the battle for feminism's soul. Does feminism tell us what feminism is, or do we tell it? Do we tell feminism what feminism is? You know what? I think we should have a shot at telling feminism what feminism is, telling feminists what feminism is, and I think they should sit still and suck it up. It's about time. They've had their say for, a good half a century now. For a long time, we've gotten an earful of what they've got to tell us. It's about time they took an earful from us. Now, we need to spin that table around. And by God, that's what we're going to do. By hook or by crook. Okay. You can tell that feminism is under fire because the feminists themselves are falling back on the good old dictionary trick, or the dictionary cop-out, as I like to call it. They seem to think that other people, meaning us, are stupid. They seem to think that we haven't got eyes and can't see what the hell feminism is. Do you get that impression, Elizabeth? They think we're stupid?
Oh, of course, of course. Unfortunately, the truth is that we know where the shoe pinches.
We do.
And
It's our
where's
foot.
the
It's our foot, and it's the shoe that they're cramming onto our foot, and we have a right to say something about it.
absolutely. I mean, the last kind of bastion of feminism really is a sort of white middle class women's movement.
And the people that have the least to complain about in this world.
Yeah. And the people who aren't necessarily going to feel that pinch. The last people in society who will feel that pinch.
Well, in this case, the pinch is what they are inflicting on somebody else. But there's all kinds of shoes and all kinds of feet and all kinds of ways that all kinds of shoes can pinch all kinds of feet. In this case, we're talking about the shoe that is feminism being squeezed onto our non-feminist foot, and we have some right to talk back about that and speak of how the shoe pinches our foot. And this is something that a lot of feminists don't seem to understand, if they even know that we exist at all. Anyway, here is a dictionary definition of feminism, a pretty standard one that you'll see around quite a bit. Feminism. 1. The theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. And 2. Organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Well, I can agree with the second part of that. Feminism is undoubtedly organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Okay, no disputing that. As for the first one, the theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, that's problematic on a number of levels, not the least of which is I don't know what the hell they're talking about here. It begs for expansion. It begs for a wealth of commentary, which simply is not there. Anyway, the problem is that with this definition that I've just given is that it does not square up with the behavior of actual feminists in the real world. It doesn't line up. Yes, it is undoubtedly true that feminism is about organized activity on behalf of women's interests. No question about that. I grant you that. But the part about equality has little to no bearing on what is actually happening.
Actually, if I might disagree somewhat with you, you say that it's organised activity on behalf of women's interests.
That's what the dictionary says.
And, you know, I don't entirely agree with that because I think it's organised activity to pursue what women want. I think it's very rarely in women's interests, actually. Poisoning half the well is not in women's interests.
Oh, well, if you take take the wide view of it, yes, it's ultimately not in women's interests, but it is at least purportedly in women's interests.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we get the message out.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That it's harming women.
We're heading there. We're definitely going in that direction. But right here, I mean, I think it's safe to say that on some level, feminism is a lobbying or advocacy movement for women.
Absolutely.
It certainly conducts a lot of activity, in the name of women, one way or another. And in that sense, yeah, it is women's interests.
It's in what they think is women's interests.
As just as a formality, a formal way of speaking, women's interest or purports to be women's interest. Now, whether that interest serves their interest in the long run is a separate question. But anyway, it is organized activity on behalf of women. That much is safe to say. It's a political lobbying force for women. That much is safe to say. And we can leave it we'll leave it there. But has little to no bearing. The part about equality has little to no bearing on what is actually happening. What is actually happening is a movement to pile up advantages for women with no reference to men at all. Men are simply impediments in the way of that project and have got to be pushed aside. That is where man-hating, disagree, which they like to tell us does not exist, okay? That is where man-hating steps into the picture, because there is a limit to how far you can pile up women's advantages if the rights of the male population would be considered. The requirement to treat men morally puts a limit, a cap, on how far you can pile up women's advantages before you start gouging men in one way or another. You just one-sidedly work for women as if men didn't exist. That's going to create some problems eventually. We don't take men's interest into consideration as well. So, Elizabeth, I think this gets back to what you were talking about a minute ago, about how, ultimately, in the big, broad, circular way of seeing it, it comes around and poisons women. It's not to in women's ultimate interest or anybody's ultimate interest to pursue the well-being of humanity in a one-sided way. Men and women do inhabit a social ecology. Their well-being is tied together and linked in so many ways. And this is, feminism seems to operate independently of that consideration. It seems to operate from a place of, if I may call it, female solipsism. And the best thing that you can say, if you say feminism is not about hating men, about the best you can say about feminism is that it is morally indifferent to the point of depravity about possible consequences to men of feminist activity and lobbying for women. Now, that may not be exactly the same as hating men in a conscious way, but it sure doesn't do men any favors. And then from there, you go up the spectrum toward actual expressed hatred of men or disaffection toward men, what I call the disaffection spectrum. Anyway, so obviously then it helps if you hate men. Okay, it helps a lot. If you're going to push women's interests, it helps if you hate men, because that gets a lot of roadblocks out of the way. It helps if you hate men and are able to devise a rationale in your own mind for anything you might do to them in the process of piling up women's advantages. A social movement of this kind will naturally attract women who hate men. Naturally. They'll be all over it like bees on honey, or flies on shit. A social movement of this kind will naturally attract women who hate men. How could it not? And such women will naturally gravitate toward cutting-edge leadership positions within that movement. They're the ones who will have the greatest drive, the greatest energy, the greatest motivation. And you get a bunch of women who like men or have no problem with men, they're not going to join feminism. They're not. Or if they do, they will be just marginal. They won't be the most driven and the most motivated and the most energetic members of the movement. They'll just be hangers-on around the fringe. So, there's just so many ways you can demonstrate that feminism is a hate-driven movement, and can only be a hate-driven movement. By its nature, it can be naught else than that. So yes, a social movement of this kind will naturally attract women who hate men, And such women will naturally gravitate toward cutting-edge leadership positions. And the movement's evolution will naturally be in the direction of plundering men more and more, and more significantly, rationalizing such behavior. You're piling up advantages for women, you're increasing the power of women in whatever form. Naturally, men are going to get in the way. You're going to come up, or you're going to come into conflict with male interests at some point. And if you're going to just roll over men and roll over men's interests, well, you know, you need to have a rationale. You need to have no moral compunction about what you're going to do to men. And if you're going to be in that space, it helps a lot if you just don't like men in the first place. Then you can justify anything in your own mind. And you'll be very good at rationalizing such behavior. And most of feminist literature, of which I've read quite a bit, seems to be nothing more than an extended and very complex exercise in rationalizing the hatred of men one way or another, talking loops around it and talking euphemistically, avoiding stating it too openly. And I wish they would just be honest and say, yeah, I hate men and I want to grab everything for women that I can. Now, the dictionary definition of feminism tells us nothing about any of this. It has zero bearing upon what is happening in the real world, folks. The dictionary definition of feminism is nothing better than a thought-terminating cliche, which terminates us from thinking and seeing and understanding what is actually happening. That's what any thought-terminating cliche does. It stops you from thinking. You think no further. Anyway, at this stage, the next ditch that a feminist apologist would fall back on would be, oh, but those bad things you talk about are not really feminism. See? Not really feminism. The dictionary definition of feminism is a way to deflect and to avoid the subject. Okay. If these things are not really feminism, then what the hell are they? Now, one thing's for sure. They are really real. They are really happening. And you know what? That's all I care about. I care about what's really happening in the world. I don't get my reality from dictionaries. You know, dictionary is just a marker. It's a way to keep yourself oriented. But by the end of the day, you got to put down that book and look at the world with your own eyes and figure out what the hell is going on. Where the hell is your real feminism in the real world is what I would ask these people, because I'm sure as hell not seeing it. And Elizabeth, I'm sure you can't see. Where is the real feminism in the real world?
Well, I mean, quite an entertaining anecdote. I was once accused of harassment because after spending about an hour debating with a feminist, I was defending radical feminists' right to call themselves feminists. And eventually I said, look, I'm the wrong person to argue with. Go and argue with a radical feminist. And that statement was apparently harassment. It did make me laugh.
How did they figure out that that was harassment?
I'm the wrong person to ask, Fiedelbogen. Go and ask them.
How
But
did you figure that's harassment? You said, can you recap this for us? What did you say again? You said that they should go.
We were having that conversation. They were telling me that radical feminism is not feminism,
Oh,
and I was explaining very reasonably why it was, and they wouldn't let go. So I just told them to go and argue with a radical feminist.
right. Well, so I take it this was a more of a moderate feminist, a liberal feminist that you were
Absolutely,
talking to.
yeah.
Okay, and they wish to distance themselves from radical feminism.
Mhm.
Well, that's a
It's
very interesting.
of mine.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
don't think people generally have the right to deny someone else's ID. If that's what they say they are, that's what they are.
well, a radical feminist. They say they're a feminist, but this is interesting because, of course, radical feminism is simply the logical development of feminism. Feminism has to grow in a certain direction. The only way it can grow, if it wants to continue growing at all, and in fact continue existing at all, is in the direction of radical feminism.
It's the logical conclusion, and if you take any statement from a liberal, moderate feminist, not C.H. Summers or someone like that, but your average, Jessica Valenti, Caitlin Moran, whatever, you can get to, take it to the logical conclusion of radical feminism very easily. That's what they really mean when you start unpicking something like toxic masculinity, which
Mm-hmm.
is an acceptable thing to say, socially acceptable, moderate feminist thing to believe in.
Yes, feminism is always migrating, always drifting in a more radical direction over time.
But they're all radical feminists inside, almost all of them.
Well, radical feminism is the core of feminism. I mean, it's you take that away and you wouldn't have any feminism anymore. It's like that's like the banana and everything else is the peel. Not much of a banana if there's no banana there, and it's just a peel with no banana. Not much of a banana, is it? And you take away radical feminism and you're taking away the banana and all you got left is the peel. That's how I see it. Yeah, feminism evolves and grows through time. It's dynamic, it has to keep growing, moving, expanding, taking over more territory, and slowly redefining itself to keep up with the changing times. And there's really only one direction it can move in, and that is in the direction of radical feminism. And just for the sake of reference here, I'll say it once again, radical feminism begins in the idea that women are a political sex class. This is where radical feminism branches off, goes its own way from mainstream or liberal feminism. And mainstream or liberal feminism really is a limited and rather time-bound enterprise. It has a shelf life, or well, maybe not a shelf life, but there's only so far it can go before it runs out of gas. And radical feminism is, well, it's like the nuclear power plant that keeps the fuel supply going. If feminism wants to continue surviving as a going concern, it has to branch off into radicalism at some point.
Which is why they can't define themselves.
Well,
If they were to define their goals, they would be putting a time limit on their activities.
they would put a time limit on their activities. They would say, well, we need to achieve X, Y, and Z. We do all of these things, and then we won't need feminism anymore. But of course, they want to keep feminism going. And, the only reason that you would want to keep something going like that is if you are driven from a very deep emotional space to keep putting your energy into this. They want to keep it rolling. But there's always a point where you got to draw the line and say, well, okay, women, we have achieved the following things for women. And we don't need to achieve any more, because you keep on just doing more and more and more things for women. Pretty soon it just becomes a completely selfish thing. It becomes, pure social piracy, which is exactly what feminism is. It is a social piracy. They're out for plunder, not to grab everything they can grab. And they're not about to stop until somebody or something reaches in and stops them. Anyway, where the hell is your real feminism in the real world? Because I'm sure as hell not seeing it. It's just a theoretical thing. Now, where does theory come down to earth and enter into the realm of practice? Well, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing a lot of other things being put into practice. But is the pure definition of feminism, as in the dictionary definition, is it like some precious, abstractified, platonic, homeopathic essence tucked away in its own special little apothecary's jar on the top shelf out of harm's way? It's so special. This is our pure, real feminism here, sitting in this little jar up on the shelf, and there's nothing really there, but boy, it's just such a nice idea. What's that got to do with the real world? We have to look into these questions eventually. It, sure as hell, it has no practical bearing upon the real world that we must all live in day by day. It has no tangible, active connection to that world. And indeed, it flies in the face of everything I see. Feminism is all about equality. What the hell does that even mean? Even if we could figure out what the hell that meant, I can see so many cases, so many examples where feminism is not about anything but equality. It's about grabbing more and more and more in the name of women. Which is very one-sided, and one-sidedness simply does not lend itself to equality. And that's why I cannot take the dictionary definition of feminism seriously. That's why I consider it a joke. And worse than a joke, it is a swindle. It is a mind-poisoning lie. It is like a rattle or a shiny toy used to distract a baby. But we are not babies. We are intellectual adults with fully functioning rational minds and keen eyesight. Thank you very much. And that is why we choose to veto the dictionary. We don't care what the dictionary says feminism is. We're going to use our own eyes and our own minds, and we're going to make up our minds what feminism is. And if you feminists don't like it, then get in the feminist closet with all the other feminists and talk about the real, precious, special feminism that exists only in your mind. And the rest of us will continue to live in the real world. So feminists, please go in your feminist closet and shut the door, and ideally don't come out, and leave the real world to the rest of us. Okay? We're going to tell you what feminism is. Feminism is what we say it is, and that's the law, or it's going to be the law. We're going to make it that way. We're going to make it stick. That is why we choose to veto the dictionary. It is urgent that we make our language accord with our empirical observation of reality. Sanity requires no less, and a sane future in this case requires no less. We are taking back control of the language from feminism, and the first step in that revolution is to control the meaning of the word feminism itself. Yes, the battle for feminism's soul. All feminist claims and theories of any kind whatsoever, all of them, are up for question now, and if necessary, subject to revision. And it all begins with taking control of the word feminism. We veto the dictionary, and that is a revolutionary act. There is so much more we could say about this, but let's move along. Elizabeth, do you veto the dictionary? I know I do.
I veto the dictionary. The dictionary is not a moral agent. We need to take personal responsibility for our values. We can't look in there.
That's right, and I think even more than that, we need to see what's really happening in the world. And there's a lot more we could say about this. I mean, I could write a whole book about this concept of vetoing the dictionary and why it's important and what the deeper ramifications are. But next, let's return to the subject of non-feminist politics on the university campus. This is what the episode is about, or Elizabeth, this is what I mentioned to you that the episode would be about. So here we are. I know we scratched the surface of that subject 3 or 4 episodes ago, but now it's time to dig our claws in a little bit deeper. All right, our plan for the world in general is to set in motion an unrestrained growth of critical thinking and speaking about feminism itself. An unrestrained growth of critical thinking and speaking about feminism itself. Well, we've made a pretty good start right here on the Vanguard Report in the last hour and a half or so. And that's what we do every week around here, and we try to encourage other people. We try to inspire them by example. Our plan for the world in general is to set in motion an unrestrained growth of critical thinking and speaking about feminism itself. Unrestrained and uncontrolled, I might add. This is a campaign fought upon many fronts, but the world of post-secondary education has a special, unique importance in that overall scheme of things. This unrestrained growth of critical thinking and speaking has a special name. We call it the culture of critique. And it is just what it sounds like. A culture spreading everywhere in which people speak their minds about feminism with no inhibition. This breaks a social taboo. We are not only not supposed to talk bad about feminism, we are not supposed to talk about feminism at all. That's right, we're not supposed to talk about feminism at all. Now, you might think that feminists do nothing but talk about feminism, but actually, no, they don't. They don't talk about feminism, they talk around feminism. There is a hole in their conversation in the shape of feminism, and their words flow around that hole, but they avoid very assiduously talking about feminism. Because if they did that, they would get into deep water very quickly where they couldn't swim and they would be in trouble. Feminists don't talk about feminism, and they don't want anybody else talking about feminism because, of course, that would cause certain things to be exposed, and exposure is what they don't want. The culture of critique, where people speak their minds about feminism with no inhibition. It breaks the social taboo. We are not only not supposed to talk bad about feminism, we are not supposed to talk about feminism at all, at least not in a free, detached, critical, objective manner, like we're doing here. There is an approved way of talking about feminism, namely a way that assumes the feminist point of view and speaks on feminist terms. And then On the other hand, there is a more unattached way of talking about it. Our mission is to promote the latter, to talk about feminism in an unattached way, meaning, well, specifically unattached to feminism. We want to promote a real conversation about feminism, which takes into account that the world beyond feminism is real, with a life of its own and able to discourse upon its own terms. That's an important point. Feminists appear to think that there is no world beyond feminism, that feminism is just going to go out there and change everything, and that the rest of the world is just sitting around passively waiting for feminism to perform certain operations and get everything all lined up just right. I find it very insulting. Elizabeth, what do you think about that? That feminists think we are a vacuum, think the rest of the world is a void, empty space.
Well, they have created a vacuum as far as conversation is concerned. I heard a really interesting quote which put me in mind of this recently. It was from the kind of leader of the Islamic State, and he said that 80% of their war is going to be fought on the information front. And what he was specifically talking about was a push to use Islamophobia and these kind of charges to shut down conversation on Islamism. And that is something that feminists have done very successfully.
Well, makes you wonder if ISIS is studying feminism here.
They're an unholy kind of alliance, but there's a good argument to be made in many ways for their connections.
Well, not getting too much into that right now, but basically, the feminist idea is that feminism is the one true and correct way to live for everybody, and that someday we're going to live in a completely feminist world. Everybody ideally is going to be a feminist. In fact, they say that a lot. You know, if you're not a feminist, you're a bigot, as Gloria Allred put it very famously. You know, if you're a feminist, you just believe in the equality of men and women, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And if you're not a feminist, then you're not. So what they're really pushing for is that, you know, you got to be a feminist or else.
Well, if you are overtly non-feminist, there really is no place for you on university at the moment, particularly if you're staff.
Yes.
And I would not recommend anyone at university to take a public anti-feminist stance. I would like to see it, but it's a personal choice because you are putting your well-being at risk and possibly that of your loved ones.
Well,
but, you know, is the alternative a desirable choice? To not speak your mind while you see objective reality and what a poison feminism is. If you keep quiet about that, that's going to eat you up inside, isn't it? That's how I would experience it.
I would think it would eat you up inside. You've raised good points here. This is what we're here to talk about.
But maybe there's a point for people who do not feel that they can be overtly anti-feminist at university to be covertly anti-feminist at university.
Whatever works, works. The point is that they are active, whether it's on the radar screen or below it. The point is that they are active in some way, subverting the feminist power structure. And here now, I'd like to lay out a few thoughts, you know, about how this could happen. Definitely not the only way that it could happen, but I get ideas all the time. I share them. That's me. I'm the idea man. I put ideas out there, and maybe somebody will hear it and say, hey, I like that. I think I'll try that. So the goal is not so much to argue feminism out of existence as to popularize the notion that feminism can take its lumps in the marketplace of ideas as well as any other idea. Feminism is not a special snowflake and needn't be handled with any special delicacy. It's not a sacred idol. There is nothing woo-woo about it. Well, actually, it is a sacred idol, or at least that is how people treat it, mostly because they're afraid not to. And our task is to break the spell and break the mojo. When we desecrate the sacred idol in a highly visible and public way, we destroy its power, and people will be emboldened to join in the mockery. That is how these things work. It takes a person or a small number of people to stand up, damn the torpedoes, fearlessly stand up, and then other people will start to come out of the shadows. When the hawk is nowhere in sight, the prairie dogs will come out and play. That's how it works. We seek to establish non-feminist alterity as a force upon the stage of history. And unrestrained critical thinking about feminism is how we aim to make that happen. Non-feminist alterity is just the simple fact that there is a world beyond feminism that is other than feminism, it's different from feminism, alien from feminism, cannot be reduced to feminist terms. Otherness, alterity. Okay, that's non-feminist alterity. We seek to establish non-feminist alterity as a force upon the stage of history. And unrestrained critical thinking about feminism is how we aim to make that happen. We want to instill this everywhere in society, but we all know that the university campus community is a hot theater of action, a nerve center of power, and that is what we will focus on now, for it is a key point in the web of operations. And the web of operations is something that we should be putting into place everywhere in society, not just on the university campus, but everywhere in general. Any place where you can get a foothold, basically. It is here, however, on the university campus that we should cause or bring about the emergence of non-feminism as a political identity. Okay, alterity, political identity, non-feminism, lack of feminism is not just a void, it is a something capable of pushing back, capable of talking back. A political identity. Did you catch that? A political identity. The emergence of non-feminism, not necessarily anti, although anti is a part of it, but non-feminism as a political identity. And the non-feminist sector must become something. Okay, it's not empty space waiting to be filled with feminism. It's capable of talking back, even if it talks in many voices. They're all non-feminist voices. Lack of feminism is the broad umbrella under which they all shelter, the big tent. Now, taking this onto the university campus, you want to start a group. Elizabeth, a minute ago you were talking about the university campus and about how a person ought to keep their mouth shut about feminism if they want to stay healthy there. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, my thoughts about that are that if you're in that position, you might want to think about infiltrating feminist groups because they are very skilled at, if you look at the University of York International Men's Day incident,
I've heard about that.
when, like a day before or something, it was suddenly cancelled because feminists had organised against it. And at that point, a change.org petition went up, which was actually started by a feminist, I believe, but a feminist who was probably more true to the dictionary definition than others. But by that point, it was too late. If the group who had, sorry, have I explained what it was? It was an event for International Men's Day.
Yes,
They had
I am
speakers,
familiar with
etc.
that. Mhm. They were going to
But
celebrate the
if they,
International Men's Day on this campus, but then suddenly they pulled the plug, right?
yeah, they had speakers, and they were going to talk about male suicide and so on and so forth. But if the feminist kind of organisations, there was a load of professors who joined in objecting, and if we had known, we probably would have been able to
To,
stop, or to
to,
act,
to
to
yeah,
defend the
you
event.
would have been able to head them off if you had been
Hmm.
forewarned. So they got in first, and they got in behind the backs of the other people. And also, they had their people on the inside helping them out. I mean, clearly they've got their people placed everywhere throughout the institutional structure. And they're able to coordinate these kinds of things because they've got contacts all over the place. That is a main source of their strength, in my opinion. And this is something that we can emulate, our side can emulate and eventually surpass. So it's just something to think about, something to keep in mind as we move into the future. So, thinking of a hypothetical group that you could start on a campus somewhere, university campus of your choice, wherever that might be. Basically, it's very simple what I have in mind here. All you need to do is make your presence known. Quietly, unassumingly make known to all concerned on your campus of choice that you are not feminist and that you are organized on some level. Just let them know about that. Let it sink in and let it percolate through their brains and stew. Let them stew on that. Let the thought possess them that somebody right in their vicinity is standing up to them and saying, hey, we are not you. And by implication, it's a challenge. You may not say it, but it is implied that there is a challenge there. What are you going to do about it? We're here. We're not feminist. What are you going to do about it? So, you simply announce your presence. You introduce the element of non-feminist alterity into that particular social environment. Just about every university campus these days is a feminist community, or they would define it as a feminist community. I mean, we heard this recently at the University of Toronto. We had Ashley Engel, the feminist in Toronto, who stood up and said, this is a feminist community. Well, to that I say, bullshit. It is no feminist community. It is a community for everybody. And calling something a feminist community is creating a hostile environment for people who are not feminists. So no, I don't think any university just to limit the conversation to one setting for now, I don't think any university ought to be a feminist community. And I don't think the whole world should be a feminist community. We'll get to that later. Let's just go one bite at a time here. No, the university should not be a feminist community. It should be a community where, yeah, you could be a feminist, you could form a club, you can talk about feminism, but you got to understand that other people are forming clubs and talking about other things. That feminism needs to take its place in the general marketplace of ideas. It's just another idea or another ideology. It's no more special or sacred or privileged than any other. But they seem to think that they are special. They seem to think that they have a manifest destiny to rule the world. And to that, I take pretty sharp exception.
Did the University of Toronto have anything to say when she made that statement?
You mean the administrators, the officials at the university? Did they say anything back to that?
Did they object?
I don't know that they did. I doubt that they said anything at all, you know, good, bad, or indifferent.
I mean, it strikes me that that would be against Article 19 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes the freedom to hold opinions without interference.
Yes, I think maybe you could put that construction upon it. Apparently, it has not occurred to anybody yet to put that construction upon it. I'm glad you brought that up. It's interesting. But no, this was an off-the-cuff statement made by this feminist, Ashley Ingle. She was standing up making a speech somewhere, and she was bemoaning and decrying the presence of men's issues discussion groups, or a men's issues group, which had been established at the University of Toronto, and they were trying to whip up a moral panic campaign against the presence of this group on their campus. And Ashley Ingle at some point in her speech said this is a feminist community. Now, she didn't just come out and try to stop anybody from expressing their opinion. She was just expressing her opinion. So I don't see how that falls. That might not fall under the statutes that you're talking about.
I wouldn't say that what she said was, but by not objecting, I would say that the administration at the university are implicitly agreeing with her, and that's a problem.
You're going along with her.
And they're giving the message to non-feminists and anti-feminists that they're not welcome in the community.
Yeah, that's a good thought you have there. Well, this is something that this is an idea that I've had as well. It's something I'd like to build upon. Now, if you're going to start a group on your campus, a movement on your campus, whatever you want to call it, you will not be an official campus club. They won't let you be an official club. You're going to have to do it unofficially. The way you do that, you get together, whether it's 2 people or 10 people. You could set up a website, put a manifesto on your website, and then start posting information on various topics. But basically, you announce the idea that we are not feminists. We are a non-feminist presence on Name Your Campus here, and frame it in terms of plain old civil liberties. We as non-feminist people wish to have a voice. We wish to have a presence. We wish to be free to talk about ideas that are not feminist. We wish to open a conversation about feminism that is often critical because it comes from a non-feminist perspective. All of this sort of thing can go into your manifesto. You post that on your website, and then you go about making your presence known on campus. And you can do this any number of ways. Probably this most simple and direct way is to pass out leaflets, flyers, put up notices on the kiosk. If there's an online equivalent of that, you put up notices there. And get to my favorite thing here, you break out the t-shirts. You get the good old non-feminist banner logo printed on your t-shirts, and you can order those from Cora Newbold at Cafe Press, CQ number 1, and you start wearing those around campus, and then notice the strange looks that you get from people around campus. That's just one idea. Okay. The point is, you got to make it known to all concerned that non-feminism, lack of feminism, is a thing, and anybody has a right to not be a feminist, and that this is not a feminist world. Feminism is not the world. Feminism is not the only game in town. That attitude on the part of feminists has got to end. So, once you start doing this, if you do it right, you're going to get some pushback. You're going to get some drama. They're going to come back at you. Probably they're going to lie about you. Well, be prepared for every dirty trick in the book, basically.
Yeah, I was going to add a recommendation of my own, which is basically about protecting yourself and making sure that when you're out in large groups of people who are not all feminist. And when you're at home in your bedroom, set up a camera with a timestamp so you can always account for your whereabouts. Because feminists are the kind of women who make false accusations.
They do. In fact, they are refining this as a weapon. They're weaponizing this. They're politicizing this, and they're going to keep practicing it. They're going to get better and better. This, of course, particularly applies if you're male. Now, if you're female, this situation will be somewhat different.
Yeah, although it still might not be a bad idea, but especially if you're male.
Well, especially if you're male, yeah. But the core idea here is very, very simple. You're not really doing anything. Well, you don't have to do anything. Now, further down the road, you might start doing something, in terms of activism. But initially, it's just a very simple idea. You're saying, hello, we're here. We're not feminist. Yeah. What are you going to do about it? No, I don't recommend that you literally say, yeah. But I think you get the idea. You're just simply saying, we're here. And you do that, and you're going to be a thorn in their side. And then you put them in a position. You put them between a rock and a hard place. What are they going to do? They only have two choices. They can either back off, leave you alone, leave you in peace, or they can move against you in some way. And when they do that, they will compromise themselves. They will burn themselves. They'll get in trouble by their rash and imprudent action. They'll overreach themselves. That's what I mean by compromising themselves.
If you're prepared.
If you're prepared, yes, good point. You've got to be prepared. And this is where you got to be a really smart operator. All you're doing is just saying, hey, we're not feminist. And you can maybe have little meetings off campus, more than likely, where you tell people, basically give them a speech that it's okay to not be a feminist, and then you can form a non-feminist student union. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, but you're just introducing the idea of non-feminism on your campus, the idea that it's not mandatory to be a feminist or to be part of feminism. and the very idea of non-feminist alterity, the idea that there is something, there is a world beyond feminism. Feminism is not the world. It is not the only game in town. And you're forcefully planting that seed in everybody's mind just by your mere presence. And we're getting close to the end here. I should add, do not advertise yourself or describe yourself or frame yourself as a men's rights or men's issues group. If you're going to form a men's issues group, that's kind of a separate thing, and nothing wrong with that. But there is a unique advantage that you have that you would not have if you took that road. Okay? You should simply frame yourself as non-feminist, not anti-feminist, because that sounds aggressive, and they could say you're making a threat there, but you say you're non-feminist, and you put that as peaceably as you can, and if there's to be any aggression, let it come from their side. But be very, very careful, because they're going to try every dirty trick in the book to discredit you. If you're male, they're going to try to accuse you of sexual assault. They're going to try to tie you with violent crime or who knows what. But remember, you should not advertise yourself as a men's rights group or men's issues group. You are a non-feminist group who wants to stand up for the rights of non-feminist people to just be not feminist and to express themselves freely on the subject of feminism, especially where they see feminism as a problem. This is the kind of movement, in my opinion, that you could profitably start on a university campus. And from there, it builds up.
On a related note, are you aware of what's happening with Tom Martin at the moment?
Yes, I am aware of it. I'm not aware of the very latest that is happening, but I'm generally aware of it.
Well, this is Tom Martin at Sexism Busters, all one word, on Twitter.
This is the one who tried to sue the London School of Economics.
He sued the London School of Economics. That was like 2012 or something.
Yeah, he's famous for that.
Ignoring men's issues in their gender studies department, which I believe the judge didn't take too kindly to. That got thrown out of court. But he has been on TV and in the media since, so I would say that's been a very useful action on his part. But recently he was shopping in his local town centre and he saw a protest against domestic violence and violence against women. So he stood a little distance away from them with his thumbs down and shouted, "Stop sex segregating." One of the women took her placard and hit him with it. So he grabbed it from her, and he is now facing his second appearance in court over it because she's accused him of assault.
Even though she assaulted him?
Yeah. There was a police officer nearby, but she didn't see the woman hitting him. So there's no help from there. Apparently, didn't see it. They're not letting him see the footage from, obviously there's cameras everywhere, but they won't let him see it. They say that the camera didn't catch the incident.
But they're not letting the footage be seen.
They're not letting it be seen. No, they're not letting him see it.
We're supposed to accept on good faith that the camera did not capture the incident. Okay, well, it sounds typical. This is all of a pattern. And it makes me think of Gregory Allen Elliott in Toronto. And I don't know, Liz, are you familiar with that case?
Of course.
Of course, good. Well, we don't know how that's going to end. It's still in limbo. Probably the judge's decision is going to come sometime after the first of the year. But basically, for those of you who don't know, Gregory Allen Elliott was a man who simply disagreed with a feminist on Twitter. He disagreed with a feminist on Twitter. He took her to task for her behavior, and for that, he is in trouble with the law, and he may be looking at some jail time, simply for disagreeing with the feminist. So, I mean, we see what kind of people feminists are. We see what they're capable of. There's no depth to which they will not sink at an extreme. And especially as the conflict heats up and as feminism comes under fire as a thing in society, this is going to get nasty. So everybody who should take care, be very, very careful. And unfortunately, the time is just about out, and I did not devote anywhere near the attention to this final subject that I want to do because we got so wrapped up in talking about those other things, let alone did we never even get to discussing the internet articles that I have linked there on the queue list. But that's becoming typical these days. You know, we start talking about something, and then the talk goes on and all over the place, and pretty soon the 2 hours are gone. So, I think we're going to need to wrap it up. Elizabeth, any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Actually, I would like to leave you just with a little notice about Tom. Tom Martin is currently working on a documentary called The Free Model, which is about how you get women to pay half on dates. And he is looking for a London-based producer, a producer of internet marketing and distribution, and a fluffer. So do get in touch with him at Sexism Busters if you're available.
And that is a website, sexismbusters.com.
No, he does have a website. It's Men's Rights something or other. That's his Twitter handle at Sexism Busters.
Okay. Everybody, that's just Tom Martin's Twitter handle at Sexism Busters. Is that all one word?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At Sexism Busters, you can get a hold of Tom Martin, and apparently he needs some help there. So if you think you can be of assistance to Tom Martin, get a hold of him there on Twitter at Sexism Busters. Boy, we're just about up to the brick wall of death. Elizabeth, I thank you for being here today. It's been a pleasure. And
pleasure's all mine.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So, everybody, if you want to get a hold of the Vanguard Report, we have an email address that is vanguardreport@usa.com. And we're going to sign off now. We'll be back next week for episode number 76. In the meantime, everybody, remember, never forget, feminism is what we say it is. Everybody, be excellent to each other, and we'll see you again next week. Ciao.